Well, that's another batch of Championship fixtures done and dusted. A hell of a lot of draws this weekend, weren't there? Quite a hectic point of the Championship season. We got a full batch of games coming up in midweek as well, so make sure to go ahead and stay tuned on the channel tomorrow when we'll be predicting all of those matches. But the focus of today will be going through all of the 12 games that went ahead this weekend. If you went to any of them, get your thoughts on them in the comments down below. Drop a like if you're going to enjoy. Without any further ado, let's jump in. Starting out on Friday night, we had West Brom playing out a 1-1 draw with Leicester. I did successfully predict this one. I think a lot of people had this one down as a 1-1, but only thanks to a last-minute goal from Leicester to get them back into it in the 93rd minute. Bit of a frustrating one for West Brom. They take the lead. It's an absolutely lovely run and finish by Samuel Illing Jr. Takes that one really well. After that point, the game does open up a little bit. Leicester have some chances to get back into this one, but equally with the game heading into the 90th minute at 1-0, if either side looked more likely to score the second goal at that stage of the game, it was West Brom. They had some massive opportunities to make it 2-0, and dare I say it, maybe that's been a bit of a weakness, a bit of a criticism of this West Brom side so far this season, their inability at times to kill off these sorts of matches. They've only scored more than one goal in one of their 7 matches so far, and that was against Wrexham at the start of the season. So when you're defending a 1-goal lead up against a quality side like Leicester, who definitely weren't at their flying best in this game, you always leave the door open, and in the end it was a bit of a scrappy goal, but Leicester will absolutely take that one in the end. Once again, Leicester not at their best away from home. I think they've struggled in that department so far this season. Most of the 90s I've watched them when they've been away from the King Power, but to carry on picking up points when you're not at your full flow and best, I think is a good sign, especially considering how, you know, Ipswich and Southampton have started this season. Leicester have been the best performing of those 3 that have come down from the Premier League. Into the early kickoffs on Saturday, we had Coventry putting 3 past Birmingham. I did have this one predicted as a Coventry win, but I thought it would be a bit closer than this. In the end, the red card plays a massive part in this one, doesn't it? It's really silly from Jack Robinson to give away that foul on the halfway line when he's already on a yellow card. And it got me thinking, I said this over the summer, but I was really surprised that Birmingham didn't go back in for Ben Davies. Obviously, after how well he'd done there on loan last season in League One, Davies, a player already with Championship pedigree, he's got plenty of games in the Championship under his belt previously. For whatever reason, they didn't go after him and ended up picking up Jack Robinson, which I can't help but feel like that was a bit of a mistake, to be honest with you. And obviously, at that point, when Blues are down to 10 men going into the second half, was always going to be an uphill battle from that point onwards. And Coventry really did put them to the sword in that second half. We can see by total chances, big chances, XG, it was Cov who were absolutely bossing this one. Bit of a stark contrast between these two sides so far this season, digging into some of the underlying numbers. Shots on target for Coventry, they lead the way in the Championship with 39. For Birmingham, they're 23rd. They've only had 16 shots on target in their first 7 matches. Now, obviously, context is needed for this Coventry game because they were playing a man down for the second 45 minutes. But generally speaking, that's still something that Birmingham need to address. They've got some winnable home games coming up next, though. I think that's where they'll look to turn things around. But really impressive for Coventry. Given how they started the season and how impressive some of their underlying numbers have been, I think they could be a real contender for automatic promotion. We then saw Swansea playing out a 1-1 draw with Millwall. Swansea taking the lead. It was a lovely flick sort of finish by Zandvoort Potnik, who started this season out like an absolute house on fire. Millwall get back into it just before half-time. It's a typical sort of Millwall goal you'd describe it as. Ball swung in from the left-hand side to the back post. Cooper heads it back across goal, and then Coburn gets his head on it to make it 1-1. Millwall, once again, not at their flying best, but continuing to pick up points. I think that's a good thing. Swansea, probably a little bit of frustration there, given, obviously, they took the lead in this one. Did have a decent shout for a penalty in the second half as well, Swansea, but that one was waved away by the referee. Ultimately, I think a lot of people saw this one as quite a tight game. I had it down predicted as a 1-1 draw. That's how it finished in the end. Another 1-1 draw we had was between Wrexham and Derby. I also think I predicted this one as a draw. I had it down as a 2-2. Now, the most controversial moment of this match comes in the first half when Lewis O'Brien goes in with an absolutely woeful challenge on Derby's Ebu Adams, but he's only shown a yellow card, and I can't help but feel like that was sort of the game-defining moment. I think that he's massively got away with one there. The fact that it was right in front of the referee as well, and he's not given that as a red card, was a very surprising one. Second half, this game starts to open up and looked a little bit more end-to-end between both sides. Controversial because it's O'Brien who opens the scoring for Wrexham, but then a brilliant goal from Ben Brereton Diaz to get Derby back into this one. Took that goal really well, sort of bends it into that top corner past Okonkwo. Two sides this season, Wrexham and Derby, both of which are yet to fully get going. Derby are only one place outside the relegation zone at the moment. They do have back-to-back home games coming up now. I think it's important they win at least one of those. I think they've got games against Charlton and then Southampton, both at home before the international break. Like a point in this game, it's not the worst result in the world for either side, but with both of them probably sat a little bit lower than where they'd like to be at the moment. These are the sorts of matches that you do want to be winning. After that and into the Saturday 3 p.m. kickoffs, we had Charlton beating Blackburn 3-0. They really put them to the sword out the valley this afternoon, didn't they? And fully deserved for Charlton. First half and second half, they were the team in the ascendancy, and Blackburn really struggled to lay a glove on Charlton whatsoever. Now, don't get me wrong, going away to the Valley I think will be a tough game for a lot of teams this season, but the way that Blackburn went under in the second half was quite disappointing, and they've been a really tough side to put your finger on so far this season, Blackburn, because week to week their performance levels have varied quite a bit, and on the road so far this season they have picked up some decent results. But yeah, Charlton by far and away the better side. 1-0 up going into half-time. The pick of the goals really was from Sonny Carey though. Absolutely terrific strike in the 78th minute. He's had a cracking start to his Coventry career, and then James Bree seals it off with the third goal in the end. It's something with Blackburn that we did mention a lot over the summer, but how much experience they lost from the spine of that squad. I do think that especially hinders you in an away game like this where they go in at half-time, they're 1-0 down, they need those experienced heads to lean on. Who in this side are those sorts of characters in the dressing room for Blackburn when you go into a tough away day like this against Charlton, 1-0 down, and in the second half there wasn't really much of a response at all from Blackburn. Like they barely laid a glove on Charlton here, despite having more of the ball. They crafted out nothing. Fully deserved 3 points for Charlton though, who are now up to 7th. Cracking run they've been on recently. Next up we had Ipswich beating Portsmouth by 2-1. Did successfully manage to call this one. We mentioned it in the preview to this game, but maybe this was a decent time for Ipswich to be playing Pompey with some of the injuries they've got at the moment. Obviously still without their first choice goalkeeper, Shaughnessy, out injured, still no Josh Murphy, and Connor Chaplin obviously couldn't play against his parent club. But really good from Ipswich, particularly in the first half. It felt like that was where this one really got away from Pompey. Nice goal from Philogene, and then the pull across for Hurst to get the second goal of the game just before half time. But there was a decent reaction from Pompey in the second half, to be fair, who did seem to offer a little bit more in that second half. Crafted that big chance, momentum bar. They had a spell when it looked like they were on top, and also had more of the ball in the second half as well. Got that consolation goal late from Marlon Pack, but Ipswich held out for all 3 points. I do think that performance-wise, Ipswich have been a lot more consistent at Portman Road this season than they have been away from home. I think that's the next thing they really need to crack. And next for Ipswich is away at Bristol City, so very interested to see how that game goes for them. For Pompey, I wouldn't be too down after this one. I think it's going to be a tough place to go to this season, and Ipswich's quality in the first half was ultimately the difference here. Finally, Sheffield United have got their first points on the board and the first win of the season. It came away at Oxford. We mentioned it on one of the previous videos, but how big it was that Sheff United got their first win of the season before this next international break. So going away to Oxford, walking away with a clean sheet and all 3 points is absolutely massive, because I'm not going to lie, the way the first half of this game was going, it definitely looked like Oxford were the more likely team to score. We praised Oxford a lot for their performance away at Bristol City last weekend. Thought they were absolutely excellent in that game, and it seemed like they carried a bit of that momentum into the first half here. But the killer for Oxford was not scoring when they were the team on top in the first half, and second half the momentum of this game really flipped. For whatever reason, Oxford didn't come out with the same intensity in that second half, and Sheff United obviously took advantage of that. Nicely taken goal in the end, cross from Ogbenny on that right hand side into Callum O'Hare, and then a nice finish into the bottom corner. Oxford did put the pressure on Sheff United late on and had chances to get back into this game, but ultimately it didn't fall for them, and the Blades managed to grind this one out. I do think that if Oxford had scored first in the first half when they were on top, there's every chance that Sheff United just would have gone under from that point, because of how mentally fragile that side has looked from the start of the season up until this point. But this, hopefully for the sake of Sheff United, can be a bit of a line in the sand right now. They've now got games to come against Southampton and Hull before the international break, so let's see how they go in those two matches. But a few more positives there for the Blades for sure. Next then to deep delve for Preston, playing at a goalless draw with Bristol City. I think it does tell a story in itself that Daniel Everson was by far and away the highest rated player on the pitch here. An 8.8 rating. He was absolutely magnificent throughout this game, and the save at the end that he makes from Anis Mehmeti really should do better. He's got, all of the goal to sort of aim at, but Everson makes himself really big, and the reflex to just get a hand on it is absolutely unbelievable. Undoubtedly, for me, one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship, Dan Everson, and we really had him to thank for us getting a point from this game, because I do think it was Bristol City who definitely were the better side on the day in this one. North End, apart from a couple of spells here and there, really struggled to put our stamp on this game. Like, midfield-wise, I think that's been a strength of ours so far this season. They all struggle to get into it and cope with the sort of intensity and press from Bristol City. Emil Rees wasn't up to much, but Twine and Mehmeti especially were causing us all sorts of problems here. Mehmeti, not just with his chance at the end, but another chance he had in the second half when he went through one-on-one and then put that one wide. It just wasn't his day in front of goal. Like, he by himself had an XG of 1.35 in this game. Two big chances missed. On another day, Bristol City could have very easily won this game 2-0 or something like that, and I do think it was a good reaction from them after coming off the back of quite a poor performance last time out against Oxford. For North End, I just think we weren't quite at the races, but I do think it's a positive that we've still managed to grind out a goalless draw, despite not being at our best going forward. Dobbin had a few runs and Osmajic a couple of half chances here and there. But defensively, I think North End deserve quite a lot of credit for this one, especially Daniel Everson. I still cannot believe that save he made at the end. If you've not seen it, go and check it out, because it's absolutely ridiculous. Already this season, he saved us numerous points, and the upgrade from Freddie Woodman, who was obviously our goalkeeper last season, is absolutely huge. After that, to Hillsborough for Sheffield Wednesday, playing at a 1-1 draw with QPR. Sheffield Wednesday's first points of the season picked up at home, and credit to them, they could have even gone on to win this game. It was Dominic Iorfa giving them the lead in the first half. QPR get back into it straight away in the second half. It's a bit of an unfortunate penalty to give away from a Sheffield Wednesday perspective, but by the letter of the law, with the player's arm up so high, the referee has sort of no choice but to give that one, and QPR took that away quite nicely. QPR didn't think were at their firing best for this one. Still had 14 shots, next year of 2.18. Obviously, the penalty would have boosted to that. But Sheff Wednesday really got into some decent areas here. 5 big chances they crafted out. Possession was fairly even between both sides. After QPR had that bit of a flurry of momentum after they'd scored the penalty, Wednesday got back on top and did have chances to go on and win this game, like I say. 4 points from their last 2 matches is not to be sniffed at. They've got some pretty tough matches coming up before the international break, but they've proven themselves to be a tough nut to crack at times. For QPR, just seemed like a bit of an off day for one too many of their forwards. None of them really clicked into gear. Julian Stefan obviously made a triple change at half-time with Dembele, Hayden and Frey all coming on. They seem to have a positive impact on the game. Dembele seemed to be a little bit more lively, but both sides were forced to settle for a point in the end. We also saw Southampton playing at a 1-1 draw with Middlesbrough. I do feel like this one probably a better point for Middlesbrough, considering how this one went, the fact that they came from a goal behind, where both teams are sat in the Championship table right now, and the fact that Southampton are on by far and away the longest winless run of any Championship club. 6 games without a win for Southampton. They've not won since the opening day. Now, first off, it was Saints with more of the ball, few more of the chances, albeit not a great deal to separate the two sides in terms of that much goalmouth action in that first half. Adam Armstrong gives them the lead with a nice finish into the bottom corner on the 61st minute, but Middlesbrough seem to have this bounce back ability, and the changes that Rob Edwards made in the second half once again made a big impact. This has been a real strong suit of Middlesbrough's season so far. And Edwards, I think, being really tactically switched on, making the right changes at the right point. I have to say, though, it was a lovely cutting through ball from Luke Ayling for the goal that Borough scored, but finishing 1-1 in the end. All in all, I think that's a decent point for Borough. Southampton, I do think they need to start winning football matches soon. Listen, a point against top of the Championship can never be seen as a terrible result or anything like that, but I really think they need to win at least one of these next 2 games before the international break, or yeah, Will still could find himself maybe in a little bit of trouble. Another 1-1 draw we saw this weekend was Stoke against Norwich. It was Norwich who took the lead, a quite well-worked goal actually, before Sorba Thomas levelled it up just after half-time. It did look like Stoke were the team in the ascendancy for that second half especially, and if either team were going to go on and win this game, it was going to be Stoke. Like, second half alone, they had 16 shots, 2 big chances. On another day, probably would have gone on to win this game from being a goal down. But do you know what? Norwich haven't been that bad away from home. It's just been their home form that's been the real issue for them so far this season. But you think so far this season, they've gone away to Stoke and got a point, away to Coventry and got a point. They've won away at Portsmouth and Blackburn as well. Liam Manning seems to have the template figured out for away games. It's just in those home games that Norwich have really struggled to make things happen for themselves so far. From a Stoke perspective, I do think this was a good bounce back from the QPR performance last time out, which Robbins himself described as their worst performance of the season. I think this was much more like it. Midweek will be a real test for Stoke though, as they go away to Middlesbrough, which should be interesting. And then to round off this batch of games, we had Watford beating Hull by 2-1, coming back from a goal behind. Another goal for Ollie McBurney, and it was a perfectly played first half from Hull City before the momentum seemed to completely shift in that second half. Loser being instrumental with a goal and an assist, also the same with Semedo as well, scoring and assisting himself. Defensively, you still have a few of those question marks over Hull. I'm excited to see them over a full 90 minutes in midweek when my side Preston take on Hull. Watford have been a really tricky one to put your finger on so far this season. Most of their matches have been quite tight, decided by 1 goal more often than not. It has to be said, there were chances in the first half of you getting sacked in the morning from the home crowd directed at Watford boss Paolo Pezzolano, so it still feels like even with Watford winning this game, there's still that tension there, and if they don't do well in these next 2 matches before the international break, I could still see that tension and friction being there. With all that being said, I do think there are some real quality players in this Watford squad, and so far this season we've maybe not quite seen those fully cohesive performances over a full 90 minutes. It was much more like it from Watford in the second half of this game, but we need to see that on a bit more of a consistent basis, I think, before the Watford fans are going to be properly convinced by Pezzolano. But guys, there you have it. That will wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Any other talking points that we missed off today, make sure to get them in the comments down below, and do stick around on the channel as well, as tomorrow we'll be bringing out my midweek predictions for all the games taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday. So stay tuned for those. But apart from that, I'll catch you all in the next one.